All right, it's recording. So I want to give you some quick information on our guest today before we jump in. Tiziana has over 18 years of experience in our industry. She is a professor at Platt College teaching different classes in graphic design, web design, front end, and UX. And she has twice been the recipient of the Teacher of the Year award. Beyond teaching, she does freelance work, consultant work in the industry, and is getting her master's of media psychology. Today, she will be talking to us about ethics in design. And with all that said, welcome, Tiziana. I'm going to hand over the presentation to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for this great introduction. Like she said, my name is Tiziana, and don't worry, it's not going to be a pop test at the end asking you to remember it. But what I do want to talk to you guys about, and hopefully you remember it, is about ethical design as far as user experience is concerned. And especially, I want to focus on how do you teach your clients, or how you tell your boss that ethical design is actually good for business. So it's not just a humanitarian thing that we do for our clients or customer, but it's actually good for business. So hopefully I'm going to be able to give you some tools on how to convince your boss. So I will first start talking a little bit what I mean for ethical UX design. I will give you a few examples of what I think is bad UX design, and then we're kind of going to look at how can we fix it, how can we do this better, and how can we convince our bosses so that everybody can design better. So if you have any questions, just write, I don't know, ask Rachel if you want to put it in the chat or any other forum, but I'm definitely going to be happy to answer any question at the end of the presentation, unless there is something absolutely urgent, and I'll be happy to stop. And Rachel will monitor, so she's going to tell me if there is anything really important. So I want to start by saying that I think all of us became user experience professional, or at least thinking about becoming user experience professional, because we care about our user, we care about our customers, and we want to help them and enable them by creating delightful experiences and possibly even making a positive impact in their life. In fact, we know that good user experience is the driving force behind the success of a product. So when we design or create experiences, we have a lot of diagram or rules, and every designer uses a slightly different one, but we usually are trying to get a pleasurable and meaningful experience to our user. We talk about human-centered design and design thinking, and we really giving our best. However, unfortunately, lately, I think that UX start getting a bad name. And this is because a lot of companies are using our expertise and our knowledge to create really poor experience. And in fact, not only poor experience, but actually malicious experience, in my opinion. So the user are lost in the mix. And now we see this dramatic transformation. So instead of talking about good user experiences, we talk about user exploitation. And instead of helping and enabling user, a lot of companies are deceiving, manipulating, and exploiting users. Now, this is definitely a problem. And again, it's not just because it's unethical and not moral, but it's affecting businesses on where it matters, which is the wallet. So, but before we even start, what is ethics? How can we define ethics? Now, this is a huge question, a question that's been debated since basically the beginning of humanity. There is no one perfect way to describe it, but I think most people will agree that it is a set of moral principle or guidelines or rules. They are specifically defined so that you can live in a group in peace, hopefully. However, there are philosophers that spend their whole life talking about ethics and understanding ethics. So we're going to look at a much smaller view of ethic. So we're worrying about ethic only from the perspective of businesses, management, design, and development, because honestly, that's what really matters to us. So the first thing I would say, if you wanted to, think about ethical design, it would be do no harm to your customer. And if you remember one thing about this presentation, that should be it. Just like doctors have their oath at the beginning of their career, designers should consider that. Do no harm and think about what possible consequences your design may cause. So I would say that the duty and responsibility of a designer is to treat others, and that means your boss, your colleagues, but especially your user, with fairness and respect, and placing the customer well-being above the business profit. Of course, to be a successful project, it needs to be a nice mix between helping the customer and helping the business. Otherwise, it's more of a side project. It's not a commercial product. But if there is a conflict, the customer well-being should be first. So what is ethical UX design? Or even better, what is non-ethical UX design? Unfortunately, there are not super strict rules about that. So there are definitely some attitudes and some behaviors that are 100% unethical, and I think everybody can recognize them, including the customers. And there are behavior and designs that are 100% ethical. However, most of the time, we're going to find ourselves in the middle, like in the gray area or light blue area, right? And that means that either there is no very strong definition, or they may be ethical depending on the context. So it may be okay to do it in one circumstance, it may not be okay to do it in another one. So, but important, first of all, to recognize what's absolutely not ethical. So, for example, this is a perfect example of that gray area I was talking about. So this is a picture from a shopping site that sells some kind of shoes. Now, if you look at this page, everything looks great until you get to the bottom of the page, and then you see two buttons. One of them is green, pointed to the right, and the other one is basically a ghost button pointing to the left. Now, if you read the small text, you notice that the green one says add to basket with insurance. And the other one, it says add to basket without insurance. And in fact, they even did I spell it correctly? No, they even spell insurance wrong. But so at this point, is that an ethical design or not? And there are, obviously different opinion. In my personal opinion, this is not very ethical. And this is because it takes advantage of the fact that people are attracted to brighter color, and we're used to think about moving to the next step as moving to the right side. So I think a lot of people will click on add to basket without really reading it, and they're gonna end up buying insurance without noticing. So the ethical thing to do, it would be to have one single button say add to basket, and then maybe an extra checkbox say, do you want to add insurance? That obviously will benefit the customer, but it also will benefit the business, because what if you buy shoes with insurance and you don't want it? Guess what's happening? People will start calling customer service or return the shoes. They were really upset about it because they didn't realize they do it. So all this is money that your client needs to pay. Money for calls, money for reorganizing the inventory if they return the product. So at the end, not only is an unethical thing, but it also damaging for the business. So what are some of the things that we know for sure are wrong? Well, I will say that there are two flavors of unethical design. They're easily recognized: dark patterns and data mining. You're probably familiar with the terminology of dark patterns. Sometimes they're called misleading patterns. There are a lot of different names. But the name dark pattern came from this guy right here, Harry Brignol, I think you pronounce it, which actually created a site called darkpatterns.org, who physically organized them and gave them a name. So what are dark patterns? And this is really important to understand, because a dark pattern is not a mistake. It's not text that was written wrong because I didn't know how to explain the concept clearly. The idea of a dark pattern is that is a design pattern that was created deliberately with the specific purpose of getting the user to do something that they did not want to do. So it's not a mistake, it's done absolutely on purpose. He classifies a lot of them. I'm going to mention just a couple that I think you'll be familiar with. So those are two sets of mobile ads. If you ever surf the web on a mobile phone, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So why are those dark patterns? Well, first of all, the one on the left, the three screens on the left, notice where they have the close button. Now, it's very high contrast, so it's easy to see. However, most people would expect the close button to be on the top left. So it could happen, depending on what site this popping up on, that user will not be able to find it. And the other one is even worse, because the area that you need to click to close the ads is that little tiny X on the top left. And I know if you try to do that, there is a very high chances you end up clicking the banner. And that's not you. The reason that is because the hit area for that button is really, really small. And the banner is 100% clickable, which means if you barely miss the clickable area, you're going to end up clicking on the ad, which means the company get a click and get money, even though you didn't intend to do that. So this is what one of the type of dark pattern that would have been called like a bait and switch. Basically, you try to do one thing, but then a different undesirable thing happens instead. For example, this is the website from Quartz. It's some kind of journalistic site. And in fact, they are proud to say that they have a mission. They want to support journalism with a mission. So like many other those sites, they will say, well, help us, and becoming a member. I did consider doing that. And there is a beautiful blue button that say become a member. Now, what my expectation were clicking that button, that will show me what kind of membership are available. But I was wrong, because when I clicked that button, this is what I saw, meaning to be able to see my plans and pricing, I have to enter my email. And I can't see the price unless I enter my email. And therefore, I agree to the policy so that they can send me advertisement. This is definitely a bait and switch, because I wanted to help them out. I was very convinced, but I want to know how much it costs. And I can't do that until I agree to get spam from them. Another very common one is called a trick question. A trick question is an option or a choice or a field that is explained so confusingly that you don't understand what you're supposed to do. Now, I'm not even going to get into why the form is badly designed, but if you look at the two checkboxes at the bottom, notice that the first one says, please do not send me details of product and offer. Okay? So, oh, this is another example. And the second one is said, please send. So the two identical checkboxes do the exact opposite thing. The first one, you have to check it so you don't get whatever offers. And the second one, you have to check it if you want it. This is incredibly confusing. And I think the example on top is even more confusing, because it says, if you do not want to receive the communication, please tick the box. Now, they can justify and say, hey, look, I bolded do not, and I bold please tick the button. So I did everything right. But in reality, most people spend time on other websites. And therefore, usually checking a box means send me spam or send me email. So the fact that they're using a very common convention and twist it, make it a trick question. This is one example of Roach Motel. You probably heard it a lot. Usually Amazon is used as an example of a Roach Motel. The idea is it's very easy to enter in a situation and very hard to get out. So you make a membership to a site and then it's almost impossible to cancel, things like that. But I particularly like this one because this is supposed to be a ticket special bonus. After I bought my ticket, keep in mind, that happens after I already bought my ticket and paid my money. My offer, my free offer, is to get a year subscription to Rolling Stone. Now, if you do not want the subscription, you have to contact the customer service, or you can go to their website, click on customer service, or, and say, I want to opt out. But there is more. If you opt out, you can ask for a rebate of $12.95 subscription value. So basically, they have charged me $12.95 for a subscription that I probably don't even want. And if I wanted to get a refund, I have to send a form within 30 days in an actual mailing address. So I can't do it online. I actually had to send a letter or a form. I had to print it out, and I had to send it to a PO box and hoping then maybe they're going to send me a refund. And I can tell you that I usually very careful of those things, but it did happen to me. I didn't even notice why was I getting Rolling Stone until I went back and I actually saw it. So this is a perfect example of Roach Hotel. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with confirm shaming. You may not call it that name, but those are those really annoying pop-up or overlay that come up and say, hey, win $1,000 shopping spree. And instead of letting you say, no, I don't care, you have to click on something that says, no, thank you, I don't want $1,000. Or even worse, and I think this is probably the absolutely worst case I ever seen, and it's wrong in so many levels. So it would say, hey, would you like to become an SEO badass? And you can say, yes, please make me one. Or, no, I want to continue dwelling in my mom's basement. So again, I'm not even going to get into like the sexism and fat shaming and all this other stuff and stereotyping. But in general, how are you going to feel if you click no? Even if you know this is just stupid and they just said it for making you feel bad, you're still going to feel bad. Okay, or guilty or something, like you're missing out. Now, I apologize for the really bright green color. That's not my fault. If you're actually gonna show up, let's see, hopefully. And so the problem with this guy right here is, you guys can still see my screen because it looks like it's frozen. Yes, here we go. So this is Robinhood. You probably heard about Robinhood because of the GameStop thing that everybody was betting on GameStop. But actually, I want to mention another things that are even more problematic. And in fact, Robinhood has been dinged by it, by government. So Robinhood is a site that makes investing really easy. Okay, it's commission-free investing, all the tools you need. In fact, they made it so easy that it almost looked like a game. And that attracted a lot of first-time investors. And those first-time investors obviously are usually people they don't have a lot of knowledge. The average age of people from customer or Robinhood is really low. And one other thing that distinguishes them is because they're very inexperienced, they make a lot of trades. Now, if you ever kind of wanted to invest in in trade or things like that, you know that having a lot of frequent trades is not a good strategy. It's impossible to beat the market. But because of the inexperience, a lot of people do that. Now, you may think, oh, that's not a big deal. Why is that a bad pattern? Well, turn out the Robinhood makes money with every single trade the customer make. And obviously, it doesn't say anywhere. Because it says, sure, they have, you have no commission, but they don't tell you, but every time you share and you trade, I'm going to get money, which is why, in my opinion, is a bad pattern. And in fact, I wasn't the only one because they were forced to actually change the policy and be upfront on how they made their money. Now, those are, again, just a few of the dark pattern. You can read more on the website. But I also want to talk about data mining because this is becoming a huge problem. So the idea of data mining is basically you tricking your user to give you more information than they ever wanted to. Either they notice it or not. So, for example, I don't remember which site it was, but I say, hey, to keep reading this story, get the free app or log in. So I was like, okay. That means that either I open an app and I download it, or I have to sign up with Google and Facebook. And as you know, Google and Facebook, they make their money by selling personal data and advertisement. That's how they make their money. So you don't have any option to log in unless you're using Google and Facebook, and therefore you share all your private information with them. Other example of data mining is that forms, they ask you way too much information that's absolutely not necessary. So if you look at this particular, for this particular form, notice that obviously asks you some important things like your payment, your credit card number, expiration, but then they also ask you your first name, your middle name, your last name, your address, your town, your PIN code, your telephone, your email. And a lot of time, all those fields are mandatory. And sometimes those data can put you at risk. And one other big problem of this is that a lot of companies just collect a bunch of data by default, but they don't do anything with it. However, it's still sitting on the server, which means if they get hacked or if they bankrupt and somebody buy them, they're gonna have access to all that data, and maybe they will decide to use it. That's why it's not a good idea. Plus, again, from a business standpoint, if you see a form like this, you really want to give up. You don't want to fill it out. And my favorite part, cookies. Woo! Everybody loves cookies, right? But not the one on a website. And I had to say, everybody hates banners that ask you about cookies as well. But it's very important to understand, because I can tell you that even from people in this business, there is a huge amount of confusion about what cookies are, what's functional cookies, what the difference is. So it's important you understanding, especially because then you can protect yourself, right? So what are those privacy options and those cookie policy options? Well, the problem is that they should be clear and explain you exactly what happened, but in reality, they're misleading and confusing. And most of the time, people don't have the time or the desire to actually go through a huge page full of information, and they're just gonna click the X and leave. And by doing so, you're gonna agree to whatever policy the company decided. And surprise, surprise, a lot of companies have really bad defaults as far as privacy is concerned, okay? And even something really simple, like this banner at the bottom say accept all or denial. Of course, accept all is the first option you see. And of course, when you're in a rush, you will accept it. And I've done that, even though I'm trying to be super careful about this kind of stuff. So what do sites do? Well, I'm going to show you a few examples because those are particularly bad. So this is from a company, I think it's called Abstract, and say your privacy, blah, blah, blah. And tell you kind of why they're using it, all that kind of stuff, which probably you're never going to read it. But you see there is a button that say manage setting. Of course, accept all cookies is the one that's more visible, but there is a button that say manage setting. If you do, that's what you find yourself with. So you have something called bioprivacy, you have strictly necessary cookies, performance, functional, targeting first party, targeting third party. What the heck are those? Well, strictly necessary cookies are the one that really help the website function. Those are the only one that they don't have to have permission to use. They help you remember what you put in your cart. They help you remember your login and things like that. Performance cookies usually are analytics. So they check in even in an anonymous format, they check in what you're doing. Functional cookies are cookies that may enhance the functionality of the website, but again, they're gonna remember where you are, your location, that kind of stuff. And targeting cookies, either for first party or third party, are the one they're gonna track you and sell you personalized advertisement. So if anything, always turn off targeting cookies, unless you want to be followed, of course, right? So when I saw this site, I was very excited because there is a nice button, even if it's not very obvious, but it says, do not sell my information. That's awesome. That's exactly what I want. So my expectation is I click that button, the cookie banner goes away, but I'm wrong because that's what I get. And guess what? Look at the defaults. So strictly necessary cookies are always added. But performance cookies are on, online behavior advertising is on by default. Meaning, if I click accept, or even worse, I simply close the banner with the X, I accepted those kind of cookies. And this is another one that made me feel good for a while, and then I realized that it sucked. So again, customize is barely there. You can barely see it. And when you click customize, that's what you see, the thing behind it that say reject all. So that's awesome. I can actually reject all, except that button is not active. You can't click it. So you actually have to go through the whole page, change every setting, and then, even then, reject all is not clickable. You have to say save and continue. This is ridiculous, okay? Because by law, they need to give you the option, but they're trying to make it as hard as possible. This is probably my favorite example because check out the title of this article, Ethics in Web Design, right? So that's the article. And then you have, hey, learn more and customize your cookies. I was like, sure. And guess what? I can't. I can read about it. I can learn all about how they're using my data and sell it, but there is no option except for accept. So not only they don't offer me the option that they need to, but also they made me waste my time. So, you know, and those are some of the worst examples. There are some sites that are doing better, but I barely seen, I think, a site that does the right thing. So the problem now is, okay, now you know what's bad and what's unethical. That's great. But remember all these other huge gray area in the middle? How do you know if something is ethical? Because sometimes you may have to deal with ethical dilemmas. And I can tell something really basic about design ethics. Let's say that your client wants to design an ad for vaping. You may feel that vaping is really bad and you don't want to do it. Or you may feel that it's not a big deal. Or you may feel it's really bad, but if I do it, maybe I can have a contribution so that I can actually explain how bad it is. If I say no, maybe somebody else gonna do it and they're gonna hide even more how damaging it is. So those are just some of the dilemma you're gonna, deal with every day. But there is a very easy way to figure it out. Well, is that ethical or not? Kind of a rule of thumb. I love it how he calls it IRL versus URL. So in real life versus online. So imagine that what you're trying to do on your website is gonna happen in real life. So let's say your client wanted to put one of those really annoying overlay that say, hey, sign up for our newsletter as soon as somebody gets to the website. Now, they tell you that, hey, we get a lot of sign up at that point. And you may think, oh, that's a good thing. But think about if you're walking into a store. In fact, you try to walk into the store. And before you even can pass the door, a customer service person will stop you right away and say, hey, do you want to sign up for a newsletter? You have no idea what store it is. You don't know what kind of product they are, if you even care about it. So usually you will go to a different store. It's really, really annoying, right? In fact, it is even more annoying because let's say that you say, no, I don't want your 15%. Then you keep on going through the site and you realize, oh man, I really love this product. But now there's no way to get your 15% back unless you open the site on a different browser and try all over again. Okay, so again, not good for business and customers. So there are a lot of frameworks that designers come up with, and you can make your own. But the basic of all of them, the foundation, is that, again, you need to treat others, mainly your customer, with fairness and respect. So this is what is called the principle of good design, and have a link on the last slide, and I will post my slides so you can actually access, by Dr. Matthew Beard and Dr. Simon Longstaff. And they have a few rules that say, well, just because, all before you can. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. Non-instrumentalism. So people shouldn't be just a number or part of the machine. Self-determination. That means let the user decide what they want to do. Obviously, responsibility. And this is one of the hard ones because you want to try to anticipate what is going to happen. Think about social media, right? Social media have a lot of very positive things that it brought. And it brought connections and a lot of positive, but it now is also bringing a lot of negative. So even though originally it wasn't designed necessary for being a really bad technology, there are a lot of unintended consequences tied to it. And then, of course, maximize the good and minimize the bad, fairness, accessibility, purpose. So all those things are, again, something that maybe you want to do a poster or something, have it in front of you. But if you want to do something really simple, just ask yourself those 4 questions. And I think that those 4 questions would actually gonna be a really good guidelines. So the first question you want to ask is, why am I making this decision? Am I trying to make my boss happy, or am I trying to make my customer happy? Of course, ideally, it should be both. Like I said before, if your product doesn't make money, it can't benefit anybody because it's not going to survive, okay? And if there, like I said before, if there is some kind of conflict, the customer should come before the business. And then you want to think about it, who benefits from this decision? So let's say that, yes, I'm doing this design because it benefits my business, but does it also benefit the customer? Or it only benefits the business and not the customer? What are the consequences? And again, think about also long-term, not just short-term. What's going to happen to the customer, to the business, if I do this design? And probably the most important one, would I want my loved ones to use it? When you design something, it's like, would I be okay if my wife, my husband, my girlfriend, my friend will go to that website and get tricked? Would that be okay? And that will definitely tell you everything you need to know about if it is ethical or not. Now, this is a perfect example of unethical stuff. So again, this is another one of those really annoying pop-up that comes in. Now, fortunately, they decided to get rid of it. So if you go to Fast Company now, that part is gone. But notice how tricky it is to find the X. The X is, or closing, is right on top of the text versus there is this beautiful big round Facebook icon, same exact color, the X right on top. In fact, there is even a little bit of a bump that points to Facebook. So I wonder how many people click that instead of clicking the X. And then, of course, let's learn about our policy. Let's see what their policy as far as privacy is concerned. This is what you get. You get zero control unless you live in California or you're a European. Now, as we will see in a second, California has one of the strictest privacy law in the United States. So it tells you that as a California customer, you have a bunch of rights. And notice that little tiny blue here in the middle, very, very hard to see. This is where you can click to details and how to opt out, which is a right if you live in California. So if you click there, this is what you see. First of all, good luck reading this. And two, if you actually wanted to say, please send me my information and don't track me, you have to fill out this horrible form and hoping that they will listen to you. Once again, that's a roach motel. Make it super hard for me to get out. So how do you convince your boss? Let's get to that, the final part, which is really important because I'm sure you're now convinced that you want to do ethical work. But a lot of time is not the designer idea to do something unethical. They may have a lot of pressure from their boss or their marketing department or so on, right? So how do you convince your boss to do something ethical? Again, you want to remind them that ethical design is good for business. How do you do that? Well, this is some of the things you can tell them. That customers right now are very cynical, they're very savvy, and there's tons of choice. So customers are not naive anymore, or at least they're getting more and more savvy, and they will notice if you're trying to manipulate it. And this is important because customers have a lot of power. They can write bad reviews. Obviously, they can shop somewhere else. Also talk about the buyer remorse and more returns. So if you sneak in that insurance in your shoe purchase, maybe I'm going to return the whole shoes because I'm so upset about it. Or at the very least, I will call customer service, and that will cost money. And the hidden cost of manipulation is also that once the user realizes that you are manipulated, customers are 100% disgusted by it, which means you pretty much lost any chance to do business with them. Right? Now, those are, I'm also going to show you some practical things in how you can explain that there is a great return of investment in ethical design. You're going to have both lower expenses and increased revenue. And any business person loves lower expenses, increased revenue. But how can you calculate it? Well, as far as the expenses is concerned, you can have fewer complaints. That means you don't have to answer that many calls. If you make a big a big mix-up, you're going to have to spend a lot of money in PR to try to fix and adjust your reputation. Also, you may need fewer programmers' hours because you don't have to fix things that were not done right the first time. How do you increase revenue? By using ethical design? Well, you're going to have more loyal customers. You're going to have a higher customer value. meaning they're gonna buy more from you, and probably free advertisement because they're gonna refer you to their friends. Just to see some numbers. And again, you can show your boss if you want to. 49% of customer, and I give you all the where the number come from, but about 49% of customer lose trust in a company that use manipulation. So about half of it. And I'm sure that as time goes by and people become more aware of manipulation, it's going to be higher and higher. If you increase your retention, basically customer that come back to you, of only 2%, as far as money is concerned, is equivalent to cut the cost by 10%. So a 2% increase in retaining your customer have the same monetary value than cutting costs by 10%. It's also 5 times more expensive to find a new customer than to keep an existing one. 5 times. And also, not only is harder to, it's more expensive to find a new customer, but also the probability of selling to a new customer is something between 5 and 20%. And some research even said that you need to contact someone about 6 to 7 times before they decide to buy from you. On the other hand, a returning customer, you probably have a probability of selling back to him or her about 60 to 70%. So much higher. And then, of course, after a bad experience, 30% of consumer will tell the company, 50% will tell their friends, and 15% will provide negative feedback online. And you can all do the math and figure it out how expensive that can be, right? So this is just a really basic graph. I know it's not very fancy and sophisticated, but the number behind, they were really interesting. So in 2019, there was this company, Watermark Consulting, figured out how much more money company that really cared about the customer experience, including the digital experience, how much more money they made compared to people that didn't care, company didn't care. And you can see that CX leaders, meaning company that really care about the customer experience, made 183% more. That's quite a bit, right? And if all else fail, your boss still doesn't want to do it, you can tell them they can avoid legal fees, because now there are more and more laws they are caring about privacy. The most famous one, the one you probably heard about it, is the GDPR, which is the European privacy law. And of course you can say, well, I don't live there, so who cares? Well, the European law covers any company whose customers and whose visitor come from Europe. So not only if your company is in Europe, but if any of your visitors are from Europe. If that's the case, you need to give them, there is a lot of rules and regulation. That's why you see those cookie banners or those kind of things. There is also what is called the COPPA, or Children Online Privacy Protection Rule. This has been around for a while, but is only concerning children under 13, which is why Facebook and all the social media say that you cannot make an account if you're under 13. And the one you may never heard, because you don't live in California, is the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. This was actually established first in 2018 and is probably the closest you can get to the GDPR, which is the strictest privacy law. And one of the things that this law says that you have the right to refuse to be followed, you have the right to get your information, and you have the right to delete all the information. In fact, in 2020, they added a new part that actually condemned dark patterns, which it was really interesting. Now, of course, let's see how you can enforce it, but there can be serious legal repercussion. I don't know if you guys remember this when it happened when there was an upgrading to Windows 10. The first window that Windows 10 had, it was upgrading to Windows is free for a limited time. The only option is upgrade now or upgrade to now. No other option. What if you don't want to upgrade? Well, too bad for you, right? Then they have a different one that was even better, because you said based on your Windows setting, your PC is scheduled to update right now, change the schedule here. But if you close this window, it would actually automatically update it for you. Now, obviously, this is very unethical, but it also costs Windows a lot of money, okay? Because a lot of people sue them in Illinois and other states, and they actually won. And so Microsoft is not allowed to do things so deceiving, and he had to pay quite a bit of money because of this. So this is a very strong legal consequence. Amazon is another one that is pretty much in hot water. And they change it all the time. This was their process in February. So honestly, I haven't checked it to see if they change it again. And this is already better than what it used to be. So to cancel your account, you cannot go to your account settings. So if you go to my account, there's nowhere where you can say cancel my account. You have to go to the bottom of the page and find help. Then when you get help, you get a bunch of information all the way to the bottom of the page. There's something that say managing your account. If you click manage your account, then you finally see end your Amazon Prime membership. All right, I'm done, right? Wrong. When you get there, you say, well, you can end it by selecting a membership, but remember that everything will be canceled. I was like, okay, fine, I want to end membership. Are you sure? You saved $234 in shipping fee. Are you sure you want to do that? And look at, remind me later, keep my benefits, and remind me 3 days before my membership renews. And honestly, I stopped here because I really didn't want to cancel my account. But I wouldn't be surprised if I say cancel my benefit, which by the way is sandwiched in between two other buttons. It would have asked me something else again. In fact, notice the 3 steps on top. That was only step number 1. So that means there was probably 2 more steps before I can actually cancel. Now, this can be an inconvenience, but a consumer group in Norway actually started suing at the beginning of this year. You sue Amazon Prime cancellation process, proclaiming that is purposely made it very difficult so people will not cancel. Now, it's still going on, so I can't, still going on, so I cannot tell you who won. I'm hoping they will, but, okay. But I don't know. So there is a couple of things you can do if your boss agrees, right? You can move towards using the right key performance indicator, also called KPI. Every company measures those. And the typical one is how many clicks you get, the page view, the average time, signups, things like that. Those are not really good metrics, because what does it mean if somebody click a lot on your site? Maybe they can't find what they're looking for. Or if they're spending a lot of time on a page, maybe they're completely confused. They have no idea what they're doing. So those are not really telling you anything about your customer. But how about doing something more meaningful, like look if you actually make more money after you change to design. How many customers you're gonna retain? How you doing with cross-selling? How much does it cost for each customer? How much money you spend in expenses? How big is your bounce rate? So all of those things give you much better information about your customer than clicks or sign up to a newsletter. That means nothing, because a lot of people sign up and never open it or unsubscribe right away. So if you want to plug in some number, I'm just going to give you a very practical example. I don't know if it's 100% true or not, but let's assume it is. So let's say your call center have 200 calls in a month, and then you get, meaning about 16.6 hours for each employee to answer those calls, right? So if you consider that your hourly rate is $25, which is very generous, you will say that for each person, you pay $415 just for answering calls. But now imagine that because you change your design and everything is a lot better, you have fewer calls, maybe just 50 fewer calls a month. That means you're saving about 4 hours. The hourly rate is still the same, but the monthly cost is only $300. So per employee, you're basically saving $100 a month just by having a better design. This is another example. You're doing some kind of really big redesign. And again, you're thinking about ethical design, make it easier and better experience. So let's say that before you redesign, you had a 10% drop-off rate, people that didn't complete the purchase. And after the design, let's say you have 8%. So you actually have an increase in drop-off. Remember we talked about it before? So let's say that you generally have 1,000 people coming to your page every month. The average order is about $55, and you get usually 10% profit on per order, and you pay $1,000 to redesign and make it better like you did. Okay. Now, to calculate, you have to figure it out. Okay, when are you calculating this result? I decided I'm going to calculate it in 3 years. So if you do the math, what's going to happen is that you're going to end up earning about $2,600. You're going to basically, in 3 years, which is about $865 every year. The first year, you're probably going to make maybe even, it's not even 1-to-1 because you may make a little bit less than 1,000. But by at the end of the 3 years, your return on investment on that $1,000 that help you redesign is going to be about 3-to-1. So sure, you have to look forward, but that's a huge increase. So you're going to earn 3 times as much as you spent. That sounds pretty good for me. Okay. So to sum it up, ethical design is good for business because it reduces costs, it increases revenue, create loyal customer, keep company out of court, attract the best talent. And when using ethical design, right now, it is a competitive advantage for your company, but very soon it will be a requirement. And you're going to be way ahead of the curve if you start now. Couple of resources for you guys in case you want to learn more about ethical design. Those are 4 excellent books that I strongly recommend. I don't get any kickbacks. I just think they're amazing. Click and User Experience Revolution. They're both created by, written by Paul Bog, which is a great person to follow. Those are 3 of the most popular ethical design frameworks. So this was the Principle for Good Technology, Ethical Design Manifesto, and Privacy by Design. And those are 3 of the people that are really talking a lot about ethical design. So Paul Bog, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. He's really, really active. Again, he wrote 2 books about it, but he also have a very interesting newsletter. They have a lot of really good information on his site. Luke Wroblewski is actually being involved with front-end development since the beginning. He's the one that, if you develop a website, created the mobile first idea. And he is very active in creating ethical design. And Morten Rand Hendriksen also published a lot of articles about how we can actually design with ethics. So those are just to get you started, but I don't, if you want to know more, please contact me. I'll be happy to give you as many resources as you can. So I hope that by now you understand that ethical design is a good idea, not only for customer, but also for business. So go ahead and do something great. And with that, I'm going to thank you guys for bearing with me and listening to this presentation. This is my LinkedIn address. Honestly, I'm not very active on social media, so LinkedIn is the best way to get hold of me if you need to.